I'm very happy to have you here and very excited to have this discussion and these panelists with me today. Our topic today is actually what catch the innovators' eyes in 2020. And if you know me a bit, you know this is exactly my passion, you know, when it comes to the innovation, when it comes to where Berlin and European Commission or Europe in general can be, I would say, in the future. This is something that we really need to talk about and to highlight the winners that we do have in our ecosystem when it comes to investors and when it comes to innovators and when it comes to founders. And of course, when it comes to female founders as well. So here on the stage, we have Peter, we have Miguel, we have Astrid, and we have Tobias. And I would like to give you the stage to present yourself. What are you doing? And on the same time, share with us what do you think is the most important things and the trends that you see today and let's say your eyes are on these days. Please use your mic. Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to start. My name is Pete. I'm from Signals, from the pre-seed team. Maybe a brief background what we do at Signals. Signals is a venture capital ecosystem made out of Signals pre-seed and Signals Signals venture capital team. We support founders from the very, very early stage with pre-seed tickets up to 250,000 euros. And then we also have an adjacent fund where we have 100 million euros in the fund, and we invest 1 to 5 million euros in Series A startups. So that's what we do. My background, I've been working in venture capital since 8 years now. Started at Cooperativa, that's the maker of PropTech One Fund at the moment. Worked at German Startups Group, worked for different business angels, and then I joined Signals over a year and a half ago. So that's to me. It's a very interesting question that you asked. What is the most interesting thing that we see at the moment? What catches our eyes? So we at Signals pre-seed, we invest in SME tech and enterprise tech. And SME tech has a lot to do with digitization. So at the moment, because of Corona or the COVID crisis, a lot of small, medium-sized enterprises have to digitalize. They are forced to use tools that they wouldn't have used before because they don't have the direct customer contact anymore. So that plays well into our cards. So that is, I wouldn't say we're looking for something new at the moment. We are still following our own or our old investment thesis. However, what we are now looking at is to see whether startups are profiting from the COVID crisis or they end up losing. They are hit hard by the crisis. So maybe that's a brief explanation of what we see at the moment.
Thank you, Peter. Miguel.
All right. Hi, everyone. So Miguel Encarnacion. So I'm a Filipino, moved here to Germany 3 years ago. I'm the founder and managing partner of Unifier Ventures, which is an early stage investor. We're investing in Europe and helping these companies expand to Southeast Asia. Originally from the Philippines, like I said, my last 5 years there, I was managing a multifamily office. And this Unifier Ventures vehicle now is backed by families from the Philippines largely. And our entire angle is to use our network in Southeast Asia to help with the market entry of these startups that are looking to access those markets. I come from banking, and so through there I have like a lot of connections in Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and so for us, like we really see this entire market of 650 million people as our market that we're trying to help European founders access. That's the angle. I mean, what's exciting me is, this whole space topic of future of work. When I first moved here, we had a thesis around HR tech, so we started investing there. So some of our portfolio companies are Bunch.ai, JobPal, based here in Berlin. And we spent a lot of time looking into the space of HR tech. And when I was doing that 3 years ago, a lot of people were telling me, a lot of investors were saying, you know, that wave has passed. That was 2014, 2015, around $2 billion went into that space, and it's gone down quite a bit already. I disagreed. I felt that there was a lot more to be done in the space of, like technologies that could identify talent, upskill talent, keep talent happy. And we built, like an entire thesis around that. And now we're just like making it broader, essentially, right? From just HR tech to the future of work. So we have a little bit of a head start there because we spent an entire year really looking into that space.
Thank you.
Yeah, hello, good evening, good night, good morning, because we are so far away from everyone here that we can be assured that there's everyone listening from different places. My name is Astrid. I'm a fintech investor with Vidici Ventures. Vidici Ventures is a Scandinavian-based PE and VC. We all have a track record in banking, PE, VC in relation to fintech, and this is why, of course, I focus on the areas in this particular regard. But I had some nice connections from what you said before. So one area I see a particular move is especially in the SME environment. It is one, you could say, typical area where you have an underbanked target group. And we see what is an underbanked target group for a fintech investor is also of interest to those who look into the SME business. So we see that fintech is one area which goes far beyond and shows trends which have some similarities if you look at this customer group. Another area, and it was actually, you could say, the reason why I started to set up my own business after I had been quite a long career with DACH, it was the regulatory technology environment. And this is, again, something which, of course, partially received a boost due to COVID-19, because you have to think about how to run certain processes remote and do this in a compliant way. And again, this is a topic which I look at from the perspective of fintech, but in the end, we see that a lot of solutions in the regulatory technology environment are industry agnostic, and they can be applied also elsewhere. And yeah, these are the topics I would to bring in for our discussion today.
Thank you. Tobias.
Hi. Is it on?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Tobias. Annyeonghaseyo for the Korean folks watching us. I'm working for Sunbo Angel Partners as an investment manager. We are a Korean headquartered fund who basically just started right now its operations in Berlin. And I'm running this office here together with my six colleagues, which are not here today, but I'm happy to introduce you. So we are a Korean headquartered fund, but we invest nearly separately here in Germany. So we build our own thesis. We don't have any strategic boundaries. Our startups don't need to move to Korea somewhere. Of course, that's a kind of additional value we can provide to the startups. So generally, we invest totally opportunistic. We have a kind of soft thesis, basically on deep tech, and we focus on three main topics. That's smart manufacturing. It has a reason, which I will explain afterwards. It's biotech, so not really the funny health app, but more like really cancer treatments, diagnostics, stuff like this, and everything around e-mobility. So all battery is a focus, of course, but that's obviously pretty expensive. But every service around the battery is very interesting for us. And for me personally, I do have also a focus. So I'm watching, since I built 2 companies in AI before, I'm watching very much the development in AI, and especially like vectorization. That's the kind of deep technology I'm super interested in.
Thank you so much. First of all, you are very interesting, and you also dived, also Astrid, probably you as well, dived into the, let's call it, German ecosystem. And before talking about Asia, I also worked in Asia. I had 8 factories in Dongguan, so been there, done that, understand the culture very well, which is most important when you extend your business to other market. I want to stay here for a second, and I want to ask each of you, what do you see as an obstacle still for our Berliner's German startup to grow? Because we can talk forever about how much it's amazing, and this is an amazing city, and this is the place to be, and there's a lot of innovation here, and absolutely diversity, and we have all the ingredients to be successful. But let's put the card on the table. We have we had a talk about this also yesterday on the boat. What do you think we still miss when you evaluate startup, the local startups? Peter, please start.
That's a very, very difficult question for me. That's very interesting.
I love difficulties.
So since I am currently focused in the pre-seed stage, I think I can be honest in saying that I do not have a lot of touch points with scale-ups. So companies that are growing into
focus on what you're doing. On still pre-seed, I mean, most of the Berliners are very early stage.
Yeah. Okay, let me think for a second. So I think maybe a big difference in the startups that I've seen so far. Let me compare. Startups that I see in the pre-seed at the moment with other international startups. Most Berlin local businesses that start, or startups that start, they don't think about internationalization from the beginning. I think that's a big difference, right? So they always look at the German market first, and then they end up getting stuck in the German market, not growing. It's a very difficult question, to be honest.
But you answer the right, the right answer, let's say.
Yeah.
Miguel, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, from the perspective of innovation, I think there is money in the ecosystem, there is talent in the ecosystem. I think what's still missing is just this spirit of experimentation on the corporate side, right? Because at the end of the day, there has this trend now is happening over the last few decades where R&D is happening now outside these large corporates. A lot of it was being done internally. And now what's happening is these startups are serving as the R&D for these large corporates, and then they work with them through pilots and then put some investments, and at some point they acquire them. And I think that if you look at the US, look at Asia, there's a lot more willingness to actually test out these technologies. I mean, obviously, I'm generalizing. If you look at the DAX 30, so the 30 largest German companies that are publicly listed, 29 out of 30 have an innovation program. Some of them have 5 or 6 innovation programs. So the biggest companies are very willing to actually test stuff out, but I think it stops there, right? I mean, there's this entire segment after that I think is interested, but not really doing too much yet. And I think that's hard for the startups. And that's where we as a fund try to help. So we've set up pilots now with Asian corporates in our network. So I think there's still a long way to go there, but it requires improvement.
I mean, I love it. Even myself, raising a fund of fund, which is, LPs, family offices, corporate, I usually call it there is not enough capital available. But you actually measure it a different way, which means there's not enough access even. This is what you want to say. It's even worse than only the capital.
Well, capital is just one part of the equation, right? At the end of the day, they can build those technologies. Somebody has to use the technologies.
Exactly. Invest in them.
So corporates have to step up as well.
Good point.
I would like to disagree with you on that point. I don't think it's the job of corporates to use the technologies or the solutions that startups provide. It's the job of the startups to provide technologies that corporates want to use, that die to use. And if they're not doing that in Berlin, they look somewhere else. They look at Silicon Valley, they look somewhere else for these technologies. So I don't think it's the job of the corporates. What I'm thinking about the question that you asked, I think obstacle definitely used to be access to funding, access to capital in Germany. So you received very little amounts of money before, I think 8 years ago, and then, or 10 years ago, but that has changed recently. You see a lot of foreign investors coming to the German market, and you see a lot of startups born and raised in Germany that are getting bigger funding, so they can also enter into different markets. there are very good examples of this. You have Delivery Hero, super successful, Mr. Specs. They're all branching into the European markets. That was not the case before, right? But then with the money that is coming in, I think that has changed a lot. So I don't see that as a big problem anymore.
I agree. It's definitely is a positive progress. But if you compare it to other ecosystems, it's way slower. Astrid, you have a huge background and experience. Please share with us, what do you think about this?
I wanted to come back to the points you raised. So I think one root cause to, let's say, obstacles, although we have to admit we live in an environment which is very prosperous and also
we're very
a very comfortable ecosystem. I think we still have to state that, right? But apart from that, we of course have to address that the culture with regards to venture capital and the acceptance of venture capital in Europe is entirely different than if you compare with US or with Asia. And I think this is something which is undergoing positive changes, but nonetheless, in this regard, we also can't look away from the legacy. And if you take a look at the percentage, for example, institutional investors can put into VC, this is a very tiny amount if you compare this with other areas. I wouldn't say that Europe isn't doing fine with this regard, but if we take a look at the Prudent Men Act in the US, for example, which gave a huge push also to venture capital investments from institutional perspective, I mean, this is 30 years ago. And this is, of course, a time lag which we are competing with in Europe, and I would say, nonetheless, lots of things have picked up. So you mentioned more international capital flowing to Europe in order to bridge this gap. What I also liked about your statement is of course, international scalability. I mean, if you don't find a market which is open enough to absorb your solution or provide you access to your additional client base, okay, today we have much better possibilities to go to another market and explore different opportunities. And I think this is something what's happening, and this will then become a political debate about the infrastructure countries like Germany or other European players provide in order to be still a relevant player in this overall field of innovation.
Thank you. Tobias, you also came from, I would say, initiative that played a role of lobbyist. So you have probably also the bigger picture. What do you see there?
Yeah, so I mean, it's part of the job description, I would say, being in this, no matter if on startup side or on VC side, to basically deal with obstacles and solve problems. But generally, like from our perspective, like I think everyone agrees, like when the VC stands in the middle, so we have like kind of two main obstacles to solve. Like one is from the startup side, of course, and one is definitely on corporate or capital side. Yeah, so on startup side, just like one thing, like before I jump in on the macro level, like I personally, so for deep tech investor, it's essential to kind of distinguish if the startup is just using a new technology or if it's really building a new technology. And what I really see very often, especially like here in Berlin, that it's more on the user side, on the using side, in a different kind of way with a new business model, but not very much on the building side. Those startups are basically in the middle of the country somewhere, everywhere in Europe, and that's not easy to find them. Yeah. On VC side or on capital side, basically the obstacles are, I would say, like the courage at the end, because there is no big disruption or no big technology came just like that. There was always courage involved, and that's something like I see very much in South Korea, but I don't see this amount of courageousness basically in Germany. Like just for comparing, and that's basically the bridge to the macro level. Like when we've been when I was building up the German Startup Association, like one of our core dream was to build up a kind of Mittelstandsfonds, so like a fund of SMEs, basically. This resulted in Comparion. Of course, there's such a fund, but unfortunately, there's no SME involved in that. It's still public money, basically. But when you compare it like to South Korea, like our fund is comparable small compared to Comparion. But there are 120 Korean SMEs involved, which come from super diverse industries, like from painting, shipbuilding, tier 3, maybe car manufacturing, which have all committed to this fund to search for innovation which they can apply directly to their businesses. So that's something I was waiting for years in Germany, and that's basically really motivates me to have joined this fund, because that's where a dream comes true, basically. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yes, please.
If I may add one thing, so I think something also has changed since venture capital became popular in Germany, and that is going to allow more startups born and raised in Berlin or Germany to expand and conquer Europe or the world. Why do I think so? So there's this really prominent, everybody knows this learning from Silicon Valley, grow fast, break things. You don't need to be profitable, just revenue, etc. For a long time, that was not the case in Germany or in the German-speaking market, right? Investors wanted to see not only revenue, but also profit. They were very frugal. That has changed. I think a lot of investors are now also adopting the Silicon Valley model in Germany, also because of the influence of international investors coming into this market, right? So that is definitely going to change. You'll see a lot more startups, in my opinion, that are going to conquer Europe or expand, explore.
Thank you for this note, and I'm absolutely agree with you, and we see it more and more, and we want to encourage that, because it's coming back to what you mentioned, the courage, and it's coming back to what you mentioned as well, like the culture, and it's all fit to what we see here. But, you know, I raised 6 companies, 3 of them while I was still in Tel Aviv. And, you know, the Tel Aviv mindset is very Manhattan, Silicon Valley. It's go get there, be the leader of the market. You have investor, you go there and you deliver, let's call it. And, you know, the most important thing is to find those winners, those, I would call it, talented founders. And as a VC, it's very, very hard, and this is the majority of the efforts of really allocating those winners, not necessarily because they're already in the A round, B round, but they are pre-seed level, but you know that they are capable of deliver, which is come back to the culture, come back to the leadership, come back to many cultural or obstacles in the culture that we see here. I would like to ask you, when you evaluating or screening startup, how much power you see in the team, which of course it's a lot, but I want you to emphasize as well, because many people are here, our founders, and we want to give them some tips to go with. And on another hand, not only the team itself, how you really allocate the smart founders that you really want to be part of their journey. Peter, please start.
Another very good question.
Thank you. I can challenge you forever.
So I think, especially in the pre-seed phase, the founding team is the most important thing when we are evaluating startups. Because based on our experience over the years, we can say that most of the ideas or concepts during the pre-seed phase do not hold stand going further during the Series A, Series B, etc., right? During the life of a startup, they're going to change. So that is why it's very important for us to focus on the team and the founders or the founding team to see whether they're smart enough to spot the changes, spot where the money is, basically, right? They have the nose for it to be like, okay, this idea we started with is not going to work. We see customers are using the product in a different way. Let's go there. So that's what we're looking for. And how do you find those founders? How do you spot that? That is very difficult. I think a lot of times what we do is to look for authenticity in the founding team, right? Are they authentic, or are they just jumping on the hype? That's one big indicator for us. Why do they want to solve this problem? Is it because of their personal experience, etc.? So that is another indicator, because then you know, okay, they're the founding team, they have the drive, they have the passion, they're going to die for to solve this problem, right? So I think, yeah, that maybe sums it up, two ideas that comes to head. Yeah.
So how you literally found them? Like, okay, COVID-19,
Yeah.
I mean, not that I want to go to this direction right now, but we do not have any more conferences, you know, like we are always flying and traveling. How you really make sure that you still, you know, deploying money and keep on, and not, you know, freezing?
How do we deploy money and not
No,
freeze?
how you allocate these founders,
How do we find them?
and you make
Okay.
sure that you are not freezing because of the COVID-19. But it was coming back to the general question, how you allocate the founders.
Okay, so how do we find them, basically?
Yeah.
Well, best case scenario, they come to us.
Of course. But
and
coming back to the culture, that not necessarily they will come to us, definitely when it comes to female founder. This is what I'm asking you.
Yeah, so well, we employ different tools, right? So the most easiest thing for us is to do a lot of content marketing, go to conferences such as these to attract the customers, to make aware of us so they come to us. But if that doesn't work, we have different tools. We partner with Entrepreneur First, for example. Like, they bring the smart, bright people together to found companies. I think that's what we do. We go to the universities, we try to find them where they are. And that has been working really well, I think. So, yeah, I would say we partner with super early, even though we have pre-seed, we partner with even more earlier institutions. And also we have a very broad network of investors and also angels. So they can, they can refer us to the founders.
So it's
that
coming
are
back to
important.
network.
Exactly, network.
Okay, I will let you to rest a bit. Miguel.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I mean, this whole focus and team is super important. I mean, it's one of my passions, why I wanted to enter this industry. I think, you know, at the early stages, exactly like Peter said, you know, it's really all about the team. And so much so that for us, we've built this framework, we call it the Founders Framework, where in our due diligence, we actually spend 80% of our time understanding the teams. And we borrow a lot of concepts from psychology and behavioral economics. And at the end of the day, I mean, these are complex systems, right? I mean, a lot of people try to boil it down to one thing, grit, or I don't know, like ability to adjust, you know, like, but it's not that, right? Like, it's an interplay of many different traits at the individual level and at the group level, the founders. And understanding each of these founders, the skill sets that they bring to the table, and how that interplays with the other skill sets of the other team members, is not something you can figure out from one or two meetings or sit-downs, right? It doesn't work like that. I mean, it's super complicated. And for us, I mean, just knowing that we don't know it is enough. That's a starting point. We're not prone to biases because we know what we don't know. You know, like, we know it, right? So, like, we're always poking around, trying to understand, like, I mean, what does this team need? You know, like, what are they lacking, right? And there are some red flags that we've identified, and that helps us. But at the end of the day, you know, it's a work in progress. We know that this is a work of a lifetime. You know, like, we're constantly gathering data points about what doesn't work. I mean, there's lots of research out there also. You know, Basis Set founders published this beautiful research about how it's about complementary traits in the founding team, and that really works. And I like that also at the individual level, actually. There's this nice, you know, Harrison Assessments does this personality test around based off of paradox theory, where, for example, if you have a person, you can either be frank or diplomatic. And if you're able to balance the two, then it's forthright diplomacy. And that's what you're looking for, because if you're on either edge of that spectrum, then it's not optimal. I mean, again, it's complex. It's a work in progress. We know what we don't know, and we're trying to find the answers.
But let me challenge you a bit, because we have a great audience today. It's AsiaBerlin conference, and you said something, it's totally different. We allocate the startup, we allocate the winners, the founders, that we want to take them and to open the market for them, which means you're not necessarily early stage. So maybe you can share more with the audience.
The approach really is, I mean, we're here because we want to invest early and look for them early. And the idea is, as they progress, we help them. We do a follow-on round. And as they're ready to internationalize to Asia, that's when we bring in our network of corporates and family offices in their A or B rounds, have them come in as a strategic investor at that point, and help them with a market entry. At that point, we're sort of passing them on to our network, but our job here is to look for them first. So that's what I spend my time on. Yeah.
This is why you're a great networker. Astrid, how you do it in Vidici?
I want to come back to the topic of how to, on the one hand side, find the right team, but also pay attention to that the team finds the right investor. Because the reason why the focus on team is so important is that in the end you talk about, yeah, let me put it that way, you look for a marriage, right? And it is something which shouldn't last only for a couple of months. It should be something, well, which in the end is a lifetime of a company. And 10 years is a good term to think about that. And that's why when you go for a marriage, you also want to be sure that you still are in love with this person for the upcoming 10 years. And there is enough inspiration, there is enough things to talk about. And so if you translate this into why to invest in certain companies, of course you want to have this vision reflected with the respective teams. And that's for us, for example, with a strong sector focus. Important, of course, that the team shows it addresses a relevant problem. And if we don't see that there is experience with this particular area, then the best team can't even help. And vice versa, if you don't have a good team, probably the solution, even if it might be the best, will never hit the market in that way. And that's why there is such a large interdependency, which you have to solve with a lot of different means in order to finally take a decision. And even then, you have to be aware, not knowing everything, not knowing what the future might bring, yeah, that sometimes there can be mistakes. So you can try to limit these mistakes, of course, because the risk is quite high if you fail. But that's why the research in the beginning is so important in order to understand whether there is a larger potential that this team can hold up against the storms which obviously will come in the upcoming decade. Right.
Thank you. Tobias.
So of course, like I think in every startup-related research, the second or maybe the first even highest risk of failure is that team falls apart. Yeah. So it would be great to have a toolbox to kind of analyze the team. But I mean, like, to be honest, there are research groups, there are whole universities working on cracking the human brain, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the person who will be able to do that before them. Yeah. So what I basically do is, of course you could go like by formal criteria, searching for university, looking like how the team constellation is done, but you're basically still not sure. Yeah. So what I personally, like the one most important point for me is to see was this team able to build something in their past. It can be like, I don't know, as a child building a kind of wooden house in the forest, wooden cabin in the forest, or whatever. Anything they basically built with their hands, because that shows me like, okay, that one had this building experience already, and if I want to invest in him and to build something new, basically for me, I'm pretty sure he will get a kind of relationship to what he's building and a kind of boundary to what he's building. And that basically, and if the beer test goes well afterwards, that's for me basically enough to do the team due diligence. Yeah.
Cool. You want to add something?
No, I just want to say, because you said, I totally agree that, I mean, a lot of this research about trying to understand people and teams, a lot of like people in the academe, are better left to do that, definitely. But what the venture capital community can provide is actually the data points, right? Because we look at so many companies on a daily basis, and I think we need to be more intentional in how we gather this data and taking note of why we're saying no to particular companies or particular teams. And by doing so, gathering that data and looking back then 5 years, 10 years down the line, we're able to realize, hey, this anti-portfolio that we've built now, these companies that we've said no to, we said no because of that reason and that reason. It was completely wrong, right? And then it provides insight to us also.
Super
and
smart.
There's
Super
so much
smart.
we can do, I think.
But it's coming back to the culture. Because in another ecosystem, it's working different.
Yeah.
You know, we have also the audience and people here, and Generation Z is coming in a big wave, and you know, they are the consumer. We see it in TikTok and other very successful name. And I want to ask you, because, you know, I'm raising W Launch. You know, it's an ecosystem. It's giving us a lot of access to corporate M&A, venture capitals, and actually we are the junction to mix and match between all of this. But we also see a new generation, a new wave, even myself, as a new generation of investor, that it's not necessarily only for the revenue. It's absolutely for the revenue, but also for doing good. So I want to pick up your brain and share with all of us, first of all, how you see this wave, and second, how you really address the impact investment that we are always trying to highlight. Because from my perspective, this is the time for Europe to lead, and this message is coming from Europe, and this is what makes Asia attractive also to Europe. Maybe you will start, or you need 5 minutes to think about it.
I need 5 minutes to think.
Okay, Miguel, please jump in.
All right. Well, I mean, the first is, you know, we have to address the tricky topic, which is venture investors, most of them have, you know, like stakeholders also behind them, right? Like he was talking about the SMEs behind them, corporates behind them. There are LPs behind us. And the hardest thing about this topic, about trying to do good, is most of the time, people have a negative perception of that. If they hear you putting those words on the table, diversity, impact, what they're actually hearing is, you want to give me 2-3% returns, right? And, and it's difficult, you know, because at the end of the day, I'm able to do good by convincing people behind me to let me manage their money, because I'm the one that can find those entrepreneurs. I mean, they're
So
not
you're not going to
that.
do it because you're scared,
No.
or you do it because it's not your values?
I mean, it's more a question of communications, right? Like when I speak to my LPs, to my investors, you know, like I try to avoid those topics. And obviously, when I'm building my portfolio, you know, like it's not my only concern, right? Like I want to build that in as much as I can, but it can't be the only thing that I'm looking at, because I have to make them happy also. Otherwise, it's going to stop at some point, and I'm going to stop my ability to continue investing and continue doing good.
Which means when we're talking about impact, you immediately translate it to a less revenue. I mean, I just want to hear it, because this is the debate here, you know?
Yeah.
Because just today, I was on a panel, virtually, of course, with Brussels. We launched the EIC, the European Commission, the Horizon 2030, which is billions of billions. Thank God, also will go to Germany, and also a female founder. But we all talked about the SDG, the impact, because this is the next generation, and this is what makes Berlin, Germany, and Europe different in sense of competing other ecosystem. I mean, we cannot compete Silicon Valley, even if we will try. We will not able to compete Asia. We compete. We are able to collaborate. We are able to, you know, I would say to complete each other, but definitely not to compete. So this is a great listening and great debate that we will absolutely talk about that later. Astrid, what do you think about this?
I think we have a pull and a push component here, right? On the one hand side, we see that, of course, there is investor and LP interest to have relevant returns. But on the other hand, we also see that the topic, for example, of sustainability, ESG, is more and more important also of LPs, right? So they may not be the ones picking in the end the investments, but they want to make sure that there is a solid governance around these topics as well from the teams they invest in. And this is something which is then giving you a better chance to pass this thought, which you might have in yourself anyway, on to the areas you invest in. So then you have, of course, the other aspect which you mentioned, that in an environment where such type of topics are addressed with subsidies, with any type of additional governmental aid, you have a much better chance also to set up these businesses. And I think this is essential that we create an environment where, on the one hand side, such business models are supported until they can survive and live independently, and where you also then address that in the end, this is also a good area of return. So you do not only do it for the good, you also have a positive impact with regards to creating new jobs, creating a different environment of sustainability with a meaningful return. And I think this is where we are just at the beginning, but we see these two aspects already, and I think this is just going to evolve going forward.
Yeah, and thank you for saying going forward, because this is what we need to see going forward, because in Israel, you know, you see Pitango, which is $2.5 billion fund, and they are focusing on impact, not necessarily all the fund, all the capital, but there is awareness, much more awareness for diversity, for impact, and go without saying, you know, Bamboo Capital, they're doing this is also in Africa and Asia. And Tobias, I want to hear about this from you.
I honestly think that impact investing is the next step in evolution. Basically, the problem we face right now is that we can't see this change yet, but it's basically already there. The whole e-mobility market is that big because it helps us to save the planet, or it's at least a hope, basically, to save the planet. When we do tech due diligence, of course, energy consumption is a big point to compare with other technologies. You can put it directly into costs. It costs less money to operate this kind of solution. Google is investing in reducing the energy consumption of their servers because it's just cheaper at the end, right? So there's a clear business connection on impact investing. Yeah. The point is like, how will that look in future? Yeah. And what are basically the steps we should watch? I mean, energy is pretty simple, yeah. But diversity in teams, we just have two less data points, like you pointed out before. So that makes it difficult, basically to understand. And yes, the market basically there's this pull effect also from the market. The consumers are more aware of the impact and on does this harm our world or not? Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that's the next evolution.
Thank you. So, you know, our panel today, and thank you for the slide, is what catch the investors of today's eyes. And I would like to ask you, is female founder catching your eyes or not catching your eyes? Or this is an obstacle, or you refer it as an impact, or not necessarily billion-dollar company attitude? And I would like to hear it from each one of you. Please start.
Yeah, so we actively look to invest in female founding teams, or founding teams with female members, for sure. What I can tell from our last teams that we looked at is that there are not that many female founders at the moment. So with all the talk, personally, I think if there are no female founders, investors cannot be held accountable, right? There are there are many programs and also many initiatives to encourage more females to found their own teams. So I think that is very, very good, and I don't think investors will forego a very good investment opportunity just because it's a female founding team, right? It's all about the money in the long run. So for me, it doesn't really matter whether it's a female founding team, a male founding team. Of course, right now with all the attention going there, we definitely look to invest also in female founding teams, but I wouldn't say it's our sole focus, so we want to create impact. In the long run, if we're honest, it's also about the money, and if the female founding team is creating a 100 billion euro business, why not?
Good point. Thank you. Miguel.
I think it would be a disservice to say that investing in females is impact investing, because for me, I don't make that distinction. I mean, and this is what I was saying about, you know, like, if you do your job properly as an investor, then you create that impact. Because ultimately, when I make the decision about who to invest in, I'm choosing what problems to solve. And I don't see the world in terms of that's a male founding team, female founding team. But you're right. I mean, it's a topic we need to address because there's a bias. There's a familiarity bias here, right? Like, I mean, if you look at a lot of companies, they're still being led by men, like you said. And women are at a disadvantage because if you're a woman and you're a male who is assertive, is said, you know, you're assertive, you're a leader. And sometimes women who are assertive, you're pushy, you know, like, I mean, and we have
the story of my life.
And that's what I mean. We still have these notions in society, and those are some biases that, you know, are hard to change because it's decades and centuries of being used to these kinds of things. But I think society is changing right now, and that's a good thing. And what I hope is we get to the point where people don't think of investing in females as a separate thing that they need to intentionally go out and do. At the end of the day, you're just looking for the best founding teams. So
100%. But because of only 2% of the capital goes to female founder, something is wrong. Which means the change can come only from the LPs. When the LPs start to push the venture capitals, or the venture capitals themselves will start to push the portfolio to have diverse team, to invest more, to diversify the portfolio, this is how we will see a change.
But why would they do that, though? Why should they do that?
Because this is also good for the society.
Yeah, but like...
I mean, you need to work harder to find those female founders, for sure. But in another ecosystem, you have much larger amount for female founder. But this is kind of like, you know, going from the lower level to the higher level. We work on making them much more like, I would say, encouraging them to become a female founder, coming back to university and schools, coming back to culture, and at some point we will have much more, because if you go to Israel, if you go to Asia, if you go to China, you go to Silicon Valley, there's no issue, but still they have less capital. Yes, please.
No, I just wanted to say, I don't think that it's something that will change from the LP side. I actually think that the venture capital community has that responsibility because you are the people on the ground that work with these founders, and you are the one that can see that there's actually no difference between an all-male and all-female founding team. They're equally good. So it's this venture capital community that has to make a push back to their LPs and say, you know, like, we need to be more intentional in widening our scope. So, I mean,
if you're scared from the LPs, like you mentioned,
I didn't say I was scared.
Okay, I mean, didn't use the right word.
I was just painting the facts, right? Like, I mean, that doesn't mean that I'm not fighting back, but communication is important. How you present the data is important, and there's so much data out there that says that diverse founding teams are much, much better.
Absolutely. I mean, I just want to emphasize that to make sure that you understand that you are a key player in the ecosystem to change this situation. It's not necessarily only from the female founder or from the ecosystem from the bottom, but actually from the venture capitals and on top of it, the corporates and the LPs.
But well, if the LPs tell us, hey, you have to have, you can return 5x of the amount, give me a 5x return, but invest in 10 more female founders. If that is the goal, sure. But I don't think that is the goal, right?
But this is what I really wanted to hear. He says that if it's female founder, she will earn less.
No. Oh, I made a really big mistake there. No, that's not what I want to say, because there's definitely data that proves, like you said, that diverse teams or female founding teams really perform better. Yeah. But I'm just saying, if the LP wants to dictate to the investment managers or the fund managers where to put the money in, just to invest because, regardless whether that's a good founding team, right? We spoke about how to identify a good team or not, right? So if he's like, Okay, forget everything that you know about venture capital, that you know about finding the right team. Just invest in female founding teams. In the long run, you're going to have a less return. That's the truth. And then if it's like, okay, that's okay with me, but I want to see more female founders in my fund, that's what I want to say.
Okay, no, I understand. Astrid, what do you think about that as a woman? Because you're the only one I can approach to as a woman here.
Luckily, I live in an environment where I see these cultural changes, and although financial service industry in particular is quite a, I would say, it was a less diverse environment than some other industries. I clearly see, for example, in the portfolio companies we are dealing with, especially with our Scandinavian background, so there is a lot of interesting female founders around, and they are also addressed with our funds, but also with others. And again, I would rather put this into perspective of the overall diversity. I mean, you mentioned the data points we have on the success of diverse team, and of course, diversity is not only gender; it goes beyond, also addressing many different backgrounds. And yeah, I'm with you. I mean, this is what we try to find out when we address teams and assess them. Do we believe that this diversity is the right framework in order to be successful? And I think this is meanwhile something which is more and more in place as a standard, and this is good. As you said, we have to make sure that the base is even growing, and if there is no base, it's hard then to do a selection. And I think this is something where we have a responsibility as a society to drive this forward, and each one of us plays his or her role in order to drive this further.
And it's easy for you to find female founder to invest in? Or easy, or like you see them around? If you want to invest in
yeah, look, if I take a look at our portfolio companies, for example, in Scandinavia, probably the background in Scandinavia with regards to a different type of gender equality is slightly different. But there you see these female founders, and I think they are important role models also with regards to others picking up these topics. And in the end, it's also something where you then see out of your own network how this grows. And these female founders, once they have been successful, they will set up new companies, and they will also broaden the scope for additional diversity.
Thank you. What do you think?
So just starting with the business perspective, I mean, it's our planet consists nearly 50% of women, 50%, let's assume 50% of men. By statistics, probably the salary of men is a bit higher, so the man market is a bit bigger than the women market. But at the end, it's two markets, and both need to be served in a way that basically suits these markets. So if I'm I think the best example is maybe medtech, because it doesn't because they have physical difference for different kind of women or male specific treatments. So if I see a technology, a startup consisting of 3 men which are working on a solution for breast cancer detection, which I have my doubts if they understand the target group, and that's a kind of risk factor for me. So in that sense, I would look for, even if I like the solution, I would look for a solution which basically fills up this this little gap. I mean, in this medtech market, that's pretty easy, yeah. But you can basically use this thought for all kind of different approach. So I would feel also weird if 3 female founders would I don't know. I have no example for a man-specific thing right now. But I hope you understand this thought. Yeah. So I think there is a clear business approach why to search also for female for female founders. But this is too small right now to basically start a kind of revolution in this in this perception. I think the only thing we can do is basically wait. I mean, it started historically. Men had like a better optimized their life by decades to use this time for work as efficient as possible. They did it. It helped them a lot. That I mean, for decades, women helped men to do so. So right now, I mean. There needs to be support basically from the men to basically help women to optimize their work life. The same needs to happen. What happens like 100 years, decades before, but on the other side. And I think that's something that's something society really needs to work on. And we as VCs probably won't solve this problem.
Can I add something?
Of course.
So I think I want to disagree with you, Tobias. I think women, from what I have read and seen so far, especially working women, have a much more efficient use of their time at work than men. So I don't think that is, I think you mentioned briefly that.
No, I didn't mean that. I mean, for example, the raising child thing. I mean, it came from family to family, a kind of tradition, which is, of course, from my perspective, also wrong. But it's so deep in the blood of our society that and that's where women supported men for thousands of years. It's not that easy to switch that away. It's
already
right now.
Switched away.
It should be switched
but we
away.
have 4 minutes. We have 4 minutes. Anyone from the audience want to ask a question? And please don't be shy. We have a great people on the stage. Yes, please.
Miguel, you mentioned you have talked about founding teams and why they're important, and also said there are some red flags that you look at. What are some of the red flags that you look at? Maybe others could also answer.
Right. I think what Peter mentioned about authenticity is very important, right? Like,
Miguel,
I mean,
put your mic.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I mean, authenticity. You know, I'm looking always for contradictions in what they're saying and what they're doing. I mean, in meetings, there are lots of things that you commit to and that you're selling, and I'm looking to invalidate those, right? Like, I'm looking for ways to understand whether what you're saying is actually true. At the end of the day, I don't mind if you tell me what the problem is, right? Like, I want you to be transparent, and I think this is one of the biggest red flags we've seen. When I was working at the multifamily office, we did around 55 deals in 5 years, and across many different companies and asset classes. And there were times where we were super excited about the product and the business model and the market. And at the end of the day, looking back now, talking about the data points, we're like, there was that big red flag in the beginning where they said that one thing which didn't make sense, you know? And we thought, no, maybe they just didn't say it right. Now I make it a point to really push those buttons and say, you said this, you said that. Why is this the case?
Anyone else want to add?
One question that we frequently ask founding teams is, when was the last time you fought? When was the last argument you had? And we asked, how did you solve the argument? And that gives us an indication of the power balance in the team. And also we look at the cap table, whether one founder has 80% of the shares and the other has only 20%. And that is also a good way to spot red flags, because you're not going to have as much say if we're 20% of the shares as the other founder with 8%.
So we do have 1 minute, and I have to say that everything we just mentioned today, and it was amazing debate. Usually, you know, panels are quite boring, and we didn't have this situation today, and I'm very appreciate that. And on top of it, we just elaborate that how much being open to other ecosystem, other culture, go without saying Asia, that this is the topic today, it's important for us to grow as a German, as a Berlin ecosystem, to take the positive things from other ecosystem as well, but to, you know, level up everything we're doing even locally. So from all of us in a very diverse panel, I want to say thank you to each one of you, online, offline, and absolutely to each one of you to share your thoughts, to debate, and stand for your thinking, although we not really agree on everything, but we work together, and this is the most important. Thank you so much.
Thank you.